Bonjour tout le monde, quel plaisir d'être ici à Kelowna. What a pleasure it is to be in Kelowna. We've had 2 great days of great caucus conversations, great meetings about the issues across the country, but also being extremely well hosted by Stephen Fure, our local MP, who's done a great job. Obviously, we can't be here without noticing the haze and thinking about the firefighters who've worked so hard, the emergency responders right across the province through what has been a very difficult wildfire season, and again emphasizing the incredible way that Canadians come together in times of difficulty to support each other. Here in Kelowna, it was floods earlier this summer, and then forest fires now. We know there are fires and evacuations also going on across the country, particularly in Manitoba, where First Nations communities are tremendously affected, and we are certainly working with the local authorities to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to keep people safe. This is something that has become a bit of a theme this week. Obviously, we're thinking hard about everyone who's affected by Hurricane Irma, particularly the families who've lost loved ones during this terrible disaster. We know that Hurricane Irma is not over, and we're advising all Canadians in the path of this storm to be prepared, to have a plan, and to, most importantly, follow the advice of local authorities. Global Affairs Canada has been in touch with Canadians on the ground, and any Canadian in the affected areas requiring emergency assistance should contact the nearest Canadian government office or Global Affairs Canada's 24/7 Emergency Watch and Response Centre. Canada is engaged with and in close contact with the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency to determine the needs and to coordinate potential assistance as requested. Also, the HMCS St. John's will be leaving for a training mission in the region soon, and it has been ordered to be at the ready should any further assistance be requested. Of course, Canada and Canadians will always stand ready to assist in this time of need for our neighbours to the south.
Prime Minister, good afternoon. As you know, there is a humanitarian crisis unfolding in Myanmar with Muslim Rohingya refugees, and yet in all of your statements so far, you have not called out Aung San Suu Kyi specifically. You have not called her out by name. She is obviously somebody who has refused to condemn the atrocities happening in her backyard. I'm just wondering why you haven't named her, and do you feel she is a silent witness to an ethnic cleansing campaign?
The situation in Myanmar is extremely preoccupying to us, to Canadians. The minorities that have been attacked and affected and are fleeing for their lives need to be defended and supported. When Aung San Suu Kyi was in Ottawa, I expressed our deep concern for the situation the Rohingya were in then, and we continue to put pressure on the Myanmar government and all authorities to take concrete action to de-escalate this terrible conflict and to help those who are fleeing this terrible humanitarian conflict.
Do you feel she should be condemning these atrocities, and do you think her honorary Canadian citizenship should be revoked?
I think we need to continue to work with the government in Myanmar, with Aung San Suu Kyi, with all people in the region to make sure that the people affected by this conflict are kept safe, that the military is de-escalated in its actions, and that we focus on keeping lives safe. And the immediate and urgent priority is getting in control of the situation and helping the most vulnerable.
Will you help Rohingya refugees who want to come to Canada?
We will always remain the open and compassionate country we are. We have ongoing processes and rules of law that apply to our refugee process, but as always, Canadians stand ready to help.
Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. Al Waters from the Kelowna Capital News here in town. Local question, something you've been hearing a lot about, the proposed tax changes. The Kelowna Chamber of Commerce has come out refuting your contention that people who make $250,000 are paying less than people who make $50,000. I'm just wondering, there's been talk of tweaking it. When will anybody see these tweaks, and will you extend the 75-day consultation period?
We've put out a consultation paper to draw feedback on a measure that I think Canadians understand is necessary. People know that our tax system, as it stands, gives benefits to wealthiest Canadians that aren't there for middle-class Canadians, even less for those working hard to join the middle class. We got elected on a promise of fairness, a promise of growing the middle class and helping those working hard to join it. That's exactly what we're doing. We're looking at the elements in the tax code that disproportionately benefit the wealthiest so that we can continue to focus our support and help on the middle class. And that includes hardworking small businesses who need all the support they can as they work to succeed. These are measures that are aimed at the wealthiest individuals who use private corporations as a way of not paying the same tax burdens that other people tend to be subject to and don't have other mechanisms to go after. Obviously, the concerns we heard from Canadians, what we've heard from caucus members, is an imperative to ensure that we are not affecting middle-class families or middle-class small businesses, and that's exactly what we will stay focused on. But Canadians need to know that this government that did, as a very first thing, raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lowered them on the middle class, is going to continue to focus on how we help the people who really need it by doing less for the people who don't.
So will you extend the 75-day consultation period?
On est en train, we're consulting, we're hearing people's concerns, and we are acting as well. We will come forward in responsible due course with concrete proposals based on the feedback, but also based on making this tax system better for the hardest working middle class Canadians.
The dreamers in the United States who've been living under the DACA program are all typically young, educated in English in North America, 93% of their employment. I'm wondering if those are people who, if they're unable to make a life in the United States and if they follow all the legal procedures, are those people you would like to see come to Canada?
Canada is a country that has benefited tremendously over the past generations from waves of people who've come here to work hard, to build a better life for themselves, and mostly to build a better future for their kids. That's the story of Canada, and quite frankly, we are incredibly lucky in this country that Canadians themselves, even as so much of the world is turning inwards or closing off, remain positively inclined towards immigrations, toward welcoming refugees. And they do that because we know that we have a system that works, that welcomes in people and gives them the capacity to succeed. We continue to know that drawing in hardworking, engaged people who want to build a better life for themselves, to welcome in people fleeing persecution, terrible violence, and torture as refugees, people who want to build a better life for their kids, is an important part of what Canada is, and we will always continue to have a strong, rigorous, but generous immigration system. And people who come to our country will be subject to the rules and principles of our immigration system and will, in due course, if they become Canadians, contribute tremendously to the growth and wealth of our country.
And when you talk about the public support of Canadians for immigration, are you concerned that when Canadians see irregular, illegal border crossing, that risks undermining that support and bringing into this country the kind of divisive debate we have south of the border?
We've all heard some of the rhetoric of fear that people are trying to play up around irregular migrations, but what we've actually seen over the past weeks is a system that has been extremely able to handle irregular arrivals and put them through the regular steps of our immigration process. Yes, we've had to respond with extra resources and particular measures in certain places, but that has meant that we have defended the integrity and the rigor and the rules of our immigration system. And those rules apply to everyone and anyone arriving in Canada, however they apply. That is actually something that can give Canadians tremendous confidence, both in our ability to be a country that enforces rules and a system, while being the open, generous place that Canadians are so proud that we are.
Hi, Prime Minister. I'm Carmen from Black Press. One of the biggest issues we have here in the Okanagan and BC, in fact, is the opioid crisis. We've had 900 people die this year, 2 in Kelowna alone this month. You know, we've had safe injection sites for over a year now, and yet people are still dying. So I have to ask, is the next step to legalize heroin and cocaine?
That is not a step we're looking at. We know that there's much more we can do by supporting frontline emergency responders, by ensuring that people across the country have the tools to respond to the opioid crisis, by doing more of the things we've been doing around border controls, of inspection of small packages, by working with international partners, whether it be the United States or China, by ensuring that all levels of government, provincial, municipal, and federal, are working together on the broad range of issues, by working with the medical community to allow for faster approval of prescription responses and alternatives in the opioid crisis. We're also moving forward on approving more safe consumption sites, safe injection sites across the country to respond to this challenge, and highlighting every day the emergent crisis, the continuing crisis that is spreading to more and more parts of this country, and how we all need to do more to combat this terrible crisis. This is something that we take very, very seriously, and it is something that we will continue to work on with our partners and ensure we can do everything to end this crisis and keep Canadians safe.
Could we not argue that it's not working, though, because more people keep dying each month?
No, we are making headway on this, but indeed the crisis continues and indeed spreads across the country. But we are not looking at legalizing any other drugs than marijuana for the time being. We are moving forward on legalizing and controlling marijuana because we know that it's the best way to keep it out of the hands of our kids, who have far too easy access to marijuana right now, and remove the criminal elements from the profits associated with the sale of marijuana right across the country.
Yesterday, you've dispatched Pablo Rodriguez down to LA, or he's going soon, to try and preempt Hondurans and Salvadorans and people who think that they could make refugee claims here. But at the same time, you went to a citizenship ceremony and you're telling people how welcome new Canadians are, and we don't just tolerate you, but love you. And I'm wondering about the balance of those two messages, and how somebody in an environment where they feel, it's an anti-immigration environment, say in the States right now or elsewhere in the world, looks at the welcoming part and thinks, that's where I want to go. They'll like me, they'll let me in, and they don't hear the part about the rules. How do you balance those things?
Well, I think a big part of it is proper communication and ensuring that those messages get out. That's why we ensured that Emmanuel Dubourg would go down to speak with the Haitian community in Miami to dispel some of the myths and to talk about, yes, the openness of Canada, but the rigor of our immigration system and the processes that they would be subject to were they to choose to come to Canada. And we're going to do the same thing on the West Coast, and this has been long in the works in terms of making that happen. But I think it is important for us to talk about how Canada and Canadians understand that openness to immigration, welcoming people into your communities is a great way to strengthen those communities, to create resilience in our neighborhoods, to create economic growth and opportunity, not just for those new Canadians, but for everyone. Those new Canadians in the citizenship ceremony have been in Canada for many years. Who have gone through the proper steps and the proper processes and were able to become Canadians because they followed the rules and the processes and the steps involved. And that double track of both being open and generous and knowing that welcoming in people from around the world is a source of strength for our community, and linking that to the fact that we have a strong immigration system that follows through steps and processes and rules are not two separate things. Canadians are open because they know that immigration has been a success because of those rules, because of the support, because of the investments we make in integration, and making sure that we're showing as a model how countries can be more successful within diversity, within being welcoming, is a lesson that is important to the world. So I will continue to talk about Canada's openness. I will continue to tout the strengths of Canada's immigration system. But I will also continue to fight myths and misconceptions about the rigor that we go through in order to ensure that Canadians can continue to have confidence in our immigration system, and that people who arrive in this country will be able to succeed and indeed build a better future for their children and grandchildren.
Back some months back, you made a tweet that was sort of in contrast to Donald Trump's ban on arrivals from predominantly Muslim countries, and you said, "Welcome to Canada." Do you think that message, perhaps, I mean, lately you've been talking more about rules, there's more of a balance in your message. Do you think it was a little too welcoming on the one side without the counterbalancing message?
The message is one that Canada stands by, that if you're fleeing terror, persecution, and violence, well, that makes you a refugee. And Canada is a signatory to the UN Convention on Refugees. We welcome refugees into this country. But there is a process to determine whether someone is a refugee. There are steps to go through. We will always live up to our international obligations, to our Canadian values, to support people fleeing from persecution and terror. But we also know that there are lots of reasons that people choose to migrate. For economic reasons, for reasons of family. And those are immigrants. For immigrants, we have an immigration system that goes through very important steps. And it is a long process, but it is a good and solid process. For refugees, who are by definition the world's most vulnerable, fleeing a level of torture and persecution from which the state they live in cannot protect them, there are clear definitions around what is a refugee. Canada will continue to welcome refugees. And it's a great thing for me that around the world we continue to have these conversations. Because with resource depletion, with environmental degradation, with conflicts and wars, there will continue to be more and more people seeking to leave home to find a better life for themselves elsewhere. And the more we can create a world where people arriving from elsewhere are welcomed and integrated successfully into communities, the better off we are all going to be. Canada is one piece of a global puzzle on migration, and I think the more we can talk about it, the more we frame it both as openness, compassion, and self-interest in welcoming in people, while at the same time having rigor, rule of law, and processes to follow, people have a better understanding, not just of the system, but of the path forward.
Hi, Mr. Prime Minister. You said today that your tax proposals will only impact those making hundreds of thousands of dollars and essentially won't impact people making under $150,000. This is being seriously debunked by tax experts. So can you guarantee that these tax proposals will not impact people making under $150,000? This
is one of the things that we've heard very much from concerned Canadians, from our caucus members who are supportive of this proposal as long as we can ensure that we are not hurting the middle class, that we are not hurting those who are working hard to join it, and that indeed we are just making sure that the wealthiest Canadians pay their fair share of taxes. That is something that this government has always stood for, and as we incorporate the feedback we've gotten from concerned business groups, from citizens, from our own MPs, we will be moving forward in a way that does do what we say, which is make sure that the wealthiest Canadians don't have so many advantages or specific benefits that they get to take opportunities from in their tax planning that aren't available to the middle class and those working hard to join it. The fact is, many of the tools here that we're talking about removing only kick in or only become really useful once someone has maxed out both their tax-free savings account and their RRSPs. And as soon as you start talking about the small percentage of people who have or who can max out both their RRSPs and their tax-free savings account, you're talking about the wealthiest Canadians. So this approach that we're taking is all about ensuring what we've talked about from the very beginning, that we understand that growing the economy can only happen if we are investing in the middle class, making it easier for them to succeed, making it easier for those working hard to join it to succeed. Everybody knows that the middle class pay too much in taxes and the wealthiest don't pay enough. This is about leveling the playing field and making sure that those who have been most successful are paying their fair share. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very much.